Direm Yolok, half-dragons, and Merry Christmas! Sorry that there's not been much content recently, but... I can't do this anymore. I don't care if my channel dies, I'm not playing this game. Fuck all of you, you're not fucking worth it, you hear me? Do you fucking hear me? I've been taking a break. Between the balance whiplash with all the new items and people just generally not giving a fucking preseason, I've just not been enjoying the game. And also, that's happening, so it's a good time to take a break regardless. Recently, I've just been playing Cyberpunk. Fantastic game, by the way. Easily an 8 out of 10, even with all the bullshit. And with the overall story and ending that I got, I'm even tempted to give it a 9. But I don't want to leave you guys completely high and dry on League content in the meantime, so I figured why not talk a little bit about one of the only things that I want for Christmas, which is for our favorite Dragoness to finally get some love from Paparito. I've seen a lot of rework ideas on Reddit and Discord over the last couple of years, and I'm not really a fan of many of them. So this is me throwing my hat in the ring with my 4 million point, only slightly obsessed opinion over what I hope to get out of the eventual VGU. So, first and foremost, what exactly should a rework do, just on a base level? In my opinion, if you're gonna rework Champion X, it should still do X things, but better and healthier in the modern game. Better in terms of usability improvements, quality of life fixes, tune-ups to deal with all the power and mobility creep over the years, as well as finding opportunities to add skill expression to simple champions. And healthier removing point-and-click gameplay, abusive and frustrating mechanics like old Fiddlesticks-y, as well as trying to make these older champions less of a stat stick and more engaging and exciting to play and interact with. While you're doing all of this, you should try really hard to keep the champion's original identity intact. When you're done, the champion should play very similarly. It should just have better tools to do what it has to do to win games. You should keep any drastic changes to a minimum and look to keep this core fantasy and identity of the champion intact. I don't think too many people would disagree about that being what they want to get out of a VGU, but Riot's been really hit or miss in hitting those goals over the years. And the example that I'm sure we're all thinking of is, of course, Aatrox. Aatrox is the poster child for a very bad rework, and it's exactly what I don't want to happen to Shyvana. The designer behind this travesty actually said that since Aatrox didn't have a dedicated player base, he used this as an excuse to go completely off the rails and gut the champion from the inside out. This is an absolutely disgusting mentality and one that worries me a great bit since Shyvana's community is also very small and tight-knit. When the champion mains themselves refuse to recognize the new Aatrox as Aatrox and start calling him fucking Boris instead, you might have fucked up somewhere along the line. This motherfucker took a completely auto-attack based fighter and turned him into a champion built entirely around landing his Q. The only things that he chose to keep were the general lifesteal theme and his revive, and now even that's gone. I don't want whoever did this to touch Shyvana with a 10-foot pole. Urgot's another example of a similarly bad rework, but at least there they had a good reason for it. The old Urgot would just land his Q and spam E on you point and click until you managed to get in Fog of War. It was extremely degenerate gameplay, and it's not something that I think could have been really saved. He also had a really weird ultimate, even fewer people played him than Aatrox, so we can forgive that one, I suppose. It really serves him right that Aatrox became meta and competitively viable just a few short weeks before the rework launched. This earned him a huge wave of backlash from all of his new players, and I hope that Riot as a company has learned some very important lessons from this whole fiasco. By contrast, Warwick is almost universally hailed as the gold standard for VGUs. He still does all of the old Warwick things, but much better and with much healthier gameplay. They added a ton of skill expression on his Q by allowing him to hold it to flip over his target. If your timing's good, you can use your Q to follow almost every ability in the game, including flash and teleport. As far as his ult goes, running around at 9,000 miles an hour to yeet yourself at your target in a skill shot fashion is way healthier than a point-and-click suppression. In exchange for the decreased reliability, he gets to engage from much further away. And honestly, it looks like a hell of a lot of fun. Now he can chain this new long-range initiation with his E to lock down an entire team for massive playmaking potential. The Blood Scent trail that they added is huge for the Werewolf Hunter fantasy. It fits perfectly with the champion. If you want to add new mechanics, this is exactly how you do it. So Riot's been all over the place with their VGUs, with those two examples forming the outer ends of the spectrum. So before we're comfortable asking for a rework, we should look at what they've done recently, to see if they've learned any lessons and to get an idea of how they're going to treat our dear Dragon Lady. The 2020 VGUs were Fiddle and Volibear. Fiddle was actually fucking great, and they get full marks from me on this one. He's got a brand new, thematically appropriate passive to replace his old boring magic resist reduction. You don't see it very often, but it does give the opportunity for the Fiddle player to do some cheeky plays. They kept his point-and-click fear, which is huge. That is Fiddle's thing, it's very good that it stayed. They even made it more usable by lowering the cooldown and putting it on a much longer per-target cooldown, allowing him to fear multiple targets in a fight. They made his W into an AoE drain with execute damage. This is exactly what he needed to help out his clear. Good players can now pull multiple camps together to kill them quicker. Having that execute damage also plays into the fear factor and fantasy of the champion. If you've ever played against Fiddlestick support, you know what a health issue his E was. It's now just a short range cone, but it kept the silence. It's good that they recognized that the problem with Fiddle E wasn't the silence, it was the absurd range and ridiculously abusive potential bounces. And most importantly, his R was not touched at all. When you're reworking a champion, the one thing you do not want to touch is their most iconic ability. I'm a bit less of a fan of what they did to Volibear. They kind of took a chainsaw to his kit. They did amp up the Storm God fantasy, I'll give them that. He still runs at you, stuns you, fights you, wants those extended trades. But he's got 2 brand new abilities, his W behaves differently, his Q stuns you instead of flips you. They got rid of his passive entirely and stuck his old R onto it instead. The biggest problem that Volibear had as a champion was not being able to get into fights as a bruiser. The new ultimate fixes this on its own, so I'm not sure that all these other changes were really necessary. I think you could have kept him much closer to how he was and still solved his core problems. His E in particular seems to stick out like a sore thumb to me on his kit. The thing is, after all of this, he's still a really stat-checky champion, he just stat-checks you in different ways. Before you couldn't fight Volibear while his passive was up because it would just outvalue you. Now you can't do so because his W just hits too goddamn hard. He's a super easy champion to execute, and he's a really safe blind pick. He doesn't really lose to anybody, except apparently Gangplank with a level 1 Sheen. Remember that? So if you ask me, he still has some health issues, it's just more of a tuning thing than a kit thing, so he's still in a better place. Again, this VGU made him too different for my liking. I think I would have liked to have seen Thunderclaws be moved to his E, keep his old passive, and lower his W damage a bit. Keep his flip too, I'm not sure why they got rid of that. It does make me a little bit nervous that they chose to do this much to Volibear, but Shyvana already has a reliable way to get into fights, so hopefully they won't feel the need to do as much to her. Right then, so now that we've studied up on the history a bit, we clearly need a VGU, but the question is, do we want one? This depends heavily on the designer that ends up getting her, but after looking at Fiddle and Volibear, I'm gonna go ahead and say, probably. I did vote for her in the poll, but I did so with a good bit of trepidation. Back then, the absolute train wrecks of Akali and Mordekaiser were still fresh in my mind. We all remember how bad Akali was. I don't think that we're gonna get something as bad as Stealth Under Turret and have to deal with a 70% ban rate for 3 years. I don't think that we're gonna get Boris or Mordekaisered. Even Pantheon with his 100% ban rate on red side at Worlds 2019 was a huge problem. Certainly Tia's now gone, thank God, so he can't hurt us anymore. She's been under 50% win rate in high elo for a very long time now. The last time she was really good was in preseason 8 when Press the Attack was initially introduced. That didn't last very long. PTA and her Q got hit immediately, no hesitation. That's right, Shyvana gets hit like that. Meanwhile, champions like Graves are allowed to be broken for the entire fucking season and warp the entire competitive metagame around themselves. Speaking of competitive, Shyvana's not been viable in pro play since Season 4. Those were the good old days of Mundo, Renekton, Shyvana, TP, Smite, Cinder, Hulk top lane. I still have good memories of watching Darius play her, and it would be good to get some of that back. And of course, her model and rigging are all horrendously dated, and she's got like 20 voice lines. A proper VGU is indeed desperately needed. Okay, so before we start tearing into her kit, we should give some thought to exactly what the hell we're doing. First of all, what is the dragon fantasy? Dragons aren't complicated. They fight you head-on and tear you apart through sheer, overwhelming force. They tear you to bloody pieces with their fangs and claws, and then roast whatever remains down to ashes. This means that Shyvana should remain a relatively simple champion, easy to execute, and good for new players. However, there's still plenty of room to add opportunities for skill expression onto a simple champion's kit. Warwick is a great example of this done right. Stereotypical dragon things that we should keep in mind when considering her kit include Flame Breath, Frontal Cleave, snapping people up, kicking them into the Whelp Cave, Wing Buffet, and a good old Roar. These are good things to keep in mind when we look to add mechanics. Whatever we decide to change or add to her kit, it should stay in the realm of Shyvana things and mesh well with her core identity as a champion. So let's consider that identity. First and foremost, and most importantly, Shyvana chases you down without inhibiting your movement. Most of the rework ideas I see floating around involve adding some form of CC to her kit to assist on ganks. I get where they're coming from with this, but CC is still exactly what I don't want to see added onto her kit. It goes completely against her existing identity. Instead, I want to make her fast enough and mobile enough to let her catch up to her target and beat the shit out of them without needing to slow them down. Second, Shyvana has no utility and is pure damage. In order to justify this, she needs to do a lot of damage, much more than she's doing currently. She's also very much a farming, objective-based jungler. This should remain the case. As such, she should have one of the fastest and healthiest clears in the entire game. Where she's at now just doesn't cut it. She should still be able to get into a lane and gank an exposed target, but not nearly as well as something like a Nunu or a Rek'Sai. Fourth, dragons without their Flame Breath or their claws just aren't dragons. As such, I want AD and AP builds to remain and both be very viable. This is critical to the dragon fantasy to be able to accentuate either one playstyle or the other. Additionally, part of being able to play a champion well is being knowledgeable of and comfortable playing and executing different setups. Shyvana is currently a very flexible champion, and I don't want that taken away from her. Understanding how to play both AD and AP and picking the right choice for each lobby is a critical part of playing this champion correctly. Fifth, Dragon Form enhances your basic abilities. Q cleaves, E explodes, W does nothing. More on that later. A corollary to this is that Fury enhances your abilities. More on this later too. Finally, her kit and her auto attacks all synergize together. W gap closes for your Q so that you can proc your E mark a bunch. Autos reset your Q, extend your W, and proc your E mark. I don't want to see any of this going away. The thing is though, because of this, it's probably impossible to make her a good champion at level 1 and 2. Lane Shyvana, especially top lane, will be forced to play well back until level 3, and I'm not sure that there's a way to fix this without ruining the champion's identity. This kinda really sucks, but good players know how to do this safely without losing too much, so it's a small price to pay for preserving her identity. Because of this, jungle will probably always be more popular than lanes to skip the weakest part of her power curve. Okay, so now that we've got the theory out of the way, let's start digging into her actual kit. Remember, better and healthier. There are a lot of really easy ways to make her better, and there's only one real health issue to fix, and I'm sure we all know what it is. In particular, we are looking for holes on the current kit to add opportunities for skill expression without boring the champion. These are golden opportunities to add viability while still having Shyvana feel like Shyvana at the end of the day. We want to add as much as we can while taking away as little as possible. I'm also going to keep most of this on a conceptual level, so don't expect to see too many numbers. You can only start tuning once you've landed on a core concept, and I'm going to be presenting too many possibilities for that to be possible. I also don't have 200 years of experience, so what the fuck do I know about tuning a champion? First and foremost, I want to take a look at her resource. Shyvana is by far the least involved Fury champion as far as I can tell in the entire game. It serves solely as an ultimate gate, and that is its only purpose. It also has the unfortunate side effect of clearly telegraphing your ult cooldown. So here's the biggest change that I want to make. I want to untie her Fury from her ultimate. I want to add conditional Fury costs to her basic abilities to allow her to have access to resource-based decision-making before level 6. Ideally, when all said and done, this will force you to choose between using your Fury for clear speed or banking it for a better gank. Are you expecting to contest Scuttle Crab? Well then maybe you want to clear your jungle a little bit slower so you can go into the fight with more Fury. Is their top lane pushing really hard? Same deal. If on the other hand, nothing much is really happening and you know the enemy jungler is cross-map, then you're going to want to spend your Fury to kill your camps as fast as possible. So right away, we already have a great opportunity to add skill expression to Shyvana, while still keeping her the same champion. It fits with that core theme we discussed earlier of Fury enhancing your abilities, it's just been expanded a little bit. I thought about reducing the passive Fury drain while you're in your ultimate and having your abilities in your ultimate cost Fury as well. I still think it makes sense to have all abilities be free while you are a dragon. That is your time to go ham, you shouldn't be worried about that. Once you have level 6 and the ability to go rar, you're going to be weighing clear speed against having access to your ultimate. This will create a lot of really interesting judgment calls to where you only want to have access to your ultimate when you're about to use it for maximum value. This would also make you much less dependent on your ultimate. Say, if you're caught out at like 60 or 70 Fury, you can still spend that Fury and be a considerable threat in the fight. You can also spend what you have to make a gank more threatening if you see a good opportunity but you don't have your ultimate yet. On to her passive. This is another opportunity to make some big changes without raising too many hackles. 20% Drake damage is actually pretty good now that Dragon Souls are a thing, but stacking your passive still feels pretty weak. It's only about 200 gold worth of stats, which feels pretty bad now that Drake's only 25 gold on kill. 25 gold for a big objective. Rito Games. Anyway, you need to be hyped about taking dragons as Shyvana since that's sort of her thing. They need to be much more of a big deal than they currently are. The lazy answer is to just add stats to your passives, like 5 adaptive force plus the 5 resists, but it's kind of boring, we can do better than that. You could revert it to how it used to be to double in dragon form. 15 to 25 resists is kinda but 30 to 50? Now we're talking. What if instead of those resistances, you just got 200 gold and got to choose what to spend it on? Or if you wanted to get really creative, you could add some exciting bonuses at 1, 2, 3, and 4 drakes. Maybe you could get like a mini dragon soul at 3rd drake, you know? Or what if you just got soul early at 3 drakes? Would that be too broken? Maybe, who knows? And if you wanted to be cute, you could tie this back into the lore by having her mom count as a stack. Now then, onto her buttons. Her Q got hit really hard over the years. It started at 180 to 100, 100. Now it's 120 to 180. Since almost every build maxes Q last, it's downright pathetic for most of the game and basically exists to proc runes and on hits. It really should be stronger on its own. If you ask me, AD builds should really want to max Q second, and the fact that they don't is a problem that should be fixed. This is because her E mark is now too damn strong and completely overpowers a rank up incentive on your Q. Having higher uptime on that E mark for all builds is too crucial for both clear speed and dueling. Especially in lane, you can't even think about trading unless your target is marked anymore. Her Q should be strong enough that you feel good about using it in a vacuum. In order to make this happen, I'm more than willing to trade some power on the E mark. The range and animation on this ability in human form is horrendous. How many times have you been chasing a target, go to auto Q them, and they just walk out of range before your Q can complete? Most auto attack resets get some kind of bonus range, her Q doesn't and should. Its animation should also be much faster and snappier to ensure that it can complete before your opponent simply walks away. I like her Q in Dragon form and think that should absolutely stay. It's potentially huge with a high AD build. Except you filthy motherfuckers have got to fix the Halo Blades bug already. Seriously, it's been nearly a year, I'm sick of it. It's still eating a stack. Fix your shit, Riot! Now, Warwick also had a very simple Q, and I think what worked for him can work for us too. I'd like to see a different effect added if you hold down your Q button. In human form, this seems like a great spot to add a short lunge. This is thematically appropriate and sorely needed. This would cost some amount of fury and create some pretty interesting decision making. If you catch a target completely out and you know that they're 100% dead, just use your Q, proc your runes, take them down. If you've got a red buff and they might get away, you might want to use your Q to get in range to proc it. If you know that they still have an escape up, you might want to save your Q entirely and use it to help follow after their flash or other movement ability. Maybe you could have this go over walls too. It's short range, enemy targeted, I don't see why not. And in dragon form, how cool would it be to have twin bite, actually bite things? It would be a single target, twin bite, with execute damage. Execute damage is also a thematically appropriate thing to add to her kit, and it also creates a good amount of decision making. Should I just proc PTA immediately and start getting my damage down on a healthy target? Or if they're already injured, maybe I want to beat them down a little bit with regular auto attacks and then just fucking eat them. It would also help give that classic raid boss dragon fantasy because you would really not want to take on Shyvana alone. On to her W. This is her mobility skill, but it has a comparatively low magnitude and a high cooldown. This is the biggest reason why Shyvana is falling behind in the current game. Both of these should be buffed substantially, and I think I found a pretty cool way to do it. A quick note here, I don't think the move speed should decay, at all. The time where that sort of thing was necessary was long gone and past. Similar to her Q, her W damage at max rank was also nerfed from 90 to 70. That damage was put into extra on-hit damage on her W, which I'm not really sure why. It seems like Riot thought she was clearing too fast and decided to find some arbitrary way to slow her down in the early game. But again, clearing fast is her thing. She should have one of the fastest, if not the fastest, clears in the game. So just put it back. Because you're already incentivized to build attack speed in multiple ways, this just seems like an unnecessary overcomplication. Before you get your first item and you get over 1.0 attack speed, it's just a straight nerf. When they made AP Shyvana a real thing, they took away the AP ratio on her W. I want this back, and I'm more than willing to trade power on her E and R ratios. This would make AP builds not completely helpless if your E is flashed or otherwise avoided. It would amp up her fantasy since she'd have more than one way to burn you to cinders, and it would be just much healthier gameplay for everyone involved. Okay, so here's my idea. I want her W to be her main Fury dump in human form. The first activation would still be free, but now you'd be able to choose to inject Fury into the ability by hitting it again. This would give you a clear choice between clearing your jungle as fast as possible or banking up enough Fury to be more effective in a gank or crab battle situation. When you inject Fury into your W, it would also refresh the duration, allowing you to cross fast distances quickly, kinda like Warwick. The timing here would be critical and would open up an entirely new dimension of skill expression. You would have to time your button presses from long range so that you can reach your target and start extending your W before it expires. Alright, now time for the biggest hole in the kit that needs filling first. Her W does absolutely nothing special in dragon form. For a champion whose entire fantasy is dragon form amping up her basic abilities, this is completely unacceptable. Before Riot even thinks about doing anything else to her, they should look at this first and foremost. Once upon a time, it left a fire trail behind you, and I greatly enjoyed kiting people to death over it. Now, Riot didn't think that was thematically appropriate, and honestly, I kind of agree. They can do better. But to just remove it and leave nothing in its place? Ugh. It needs to do something cool. Just getting bigger is not a fucking excuse. So, what could they add? Well, a number of different things. This is an opportunity to get pretty creative. If you ask me, it should be focused on mobility or defense. Her offense is covered at this point. First of all, if you liked my Fury Injection idea, this would be either the fully ramped up version of the ability, or additional activations would be free. So the easy answer would be Extra Tenacity. Sorely needed for AD builds, and would help AP builds avoid being locked down and killed. It's also thematically appropriate with dragons being hard to stop, and would also help you extend your W to its fullest extent. Range damage reduction wouldn't be bad to help tank and bruiser builds survive being in the fight. Even more movement speed towards enemy champions to help you chase down carries. Maybe it could apply and refresh your E-mark so that you have more than one way to access that critical on-hit damage. Now the absolute dream would be cannot be slowed to make her a scaly, sexy Yi, but this might be going too far, not gonna lie. It's also kind of Yi's thing in particular, so I'm hesitant to intrude into that niche. Okay, now for everyone's favorite ability. Her E is mostly fine. It's the one ability that got drastically improved and modernized. The new long-range fireball and flame patch is much better than the short-range cone that we had before. Keep it, keep it, keep it. I love it. I don't want to see this turn into any channeled short-range breath like Ornn or something. Not only can you not auto-attack during a channel, but it would also really hurt AP builds by limiting their range. But the problem is so much of her power budget was shifted into this one ability that it's single-handedly keeping the champion afloat. This goes for AP and AD, through the raw damage and on-hit mark respectively. The way her E stands right now, it's not healthy for anybody. I want the base damage on this ability nerfed. The random level damage is a good place to start. I want the ratio hit, and I want to see the cooldown lowered substantially. Believe it or not, nobody enjoys being one-shotted from half a screen away. And not only that, I don't enjoy being fucking helpless when that carry decides to flash my E and pick me up for free. This would make AP builds much more reliable since they'd now be able to shoot more than once every 6 seconds, and AD builds would have much higher access to their mark. Also, as a side note, Flame Breath's patch definitely used to mark targets, and at some point this was taken away from us. I want this back. In case the ability barely misses or some new challenger appears, I would like to be able to position around that flame patch to force targets to mark themselves to attack me. While we're talking about her Dragon Form E, I want to take a second to bitch about its targeting. Because it has a minimum cast distance and you can't E directly under yourself, this creates issues when people are hugging your model. If someone's really hugging you, you can have your mouse pointer right on them and your E will still go sideways or backwards because it just can't cast at their location. This is incredibly, ridiculously frustrating, and it's what I hate about Shyvana the most. For fuck's sake, Riot Games, let her look down. A stiff neck is not part of the dragon fantasy, I promise you. As far as human form goes, I would like her to be able to cast it while moving. This is a small thing you can do to make her ganks a lot better, and it feels weird that a champion who's supposed to be as mobile as Shyvana is forced to stop to breathe on things. The cast time in Dragon Form is less of an issue because it does hit significantly harder. It depends on how slow or hard or quick and fast you want the ability to be. It's kinda hard for me to imagine a human form Fury cost on her E, but then I thought of what happens if your E just gives you a mini mark and you have to spend Fury to get the full thing. This would help Riot feel more comfortable to lower the cooldown substantially. This is especially important in lane because as it stands currently, you can't even think about going up to the wave unless you have your E available, thus allowing you to go up for farm much more than you can right now. In the jungle, this would allow you to use your E to pull camps over walls without losing a substantial amount of damage from not being able to auto-attack before it expires. It would also add yet another element of skill expression if you want to get full value out of your mark by reactivating it when it's about to expire. And finally, the coolest ability in the game. Her R is already mostly fine, adding the extra health and unstoppable in exchange for some range was a great change. But she still throws herself at you kinda slow, it could stand to be a little bit faster. Additionally, I would fucking love it if we could drag enemies for the entire travel path. This would add a lot of playmaking potential by letting you pull off Azir or Hecarim style flank plays. If they're gonna let fucking Hecarim displace your entire team by 5 miles like he can now, I see absolutely no reason why Shyvana should not be able to do this. It also feels really bad for a giant dragon to throw herself at someone and see them move like 2 feet. Since this would ensure that everybody you hit is right in front of you when you land, you could easily combo them for massive damage. However, once you do land, you're looking at a dead button for the rest of your transformation. This is yet another good opportunity to add some mechanics. Now, I wouldn't be opposed to an R2 costing some Fury if you wanted to make your Fury bar mean more than just a timer. But if that's what you want to do, the ability had better justify the expenditure. First of all, it would be kind of nice if we could hold the button to transform back on demand. Sometimes the correct decision is to wait for your Fury to expire before you start hitting a Gromp or a buff camp, you know, so you can get your ult back faster. But that downtime in which you're stuck in a staring contest with the Gromp kinda sucks. This would cost either a substantial amount of Fury or the entire rest of your bar to disable quick poking. Maybe you could hit your R button and then a basic ability to make it really, really big. This feeds back into a core theme of the champion, but these abilities would be so strong that you would probably have to be limited to 1 per transformation. Or you could just add another dragon thing. What are we missing? Maybe you could have her roar for short duration CC immunity, kinda like a Fiora parry. A tail swipe feels kinda weird since you have to turn around to use it. Not really a big fan. You could have her flap her wings for a short dash. What do you guys think? In terms of design, I do really like how she looks in both Wild Rift and Legends of Runeterra, especially lore. Do you want to pilot that? I want to pilot that. That's fucking sexy. Biggest thing that I want to see are some real goddamn wings. I've always hated the mutated kind of half wings she has right now. I think they were initially going for the angle that half dragons kind of shouldn't exist, and she kind of came out wrong, but that's not a good fantasy. Just give her some real fucking wings, Riot. It looks like they're keeping her well away from their elemental Drake designs, which is great. They look bad, and they should feel bad. And you know, it kind of makes sense for her to look unique. She's got a more monstrous looking human form and a less monstrous looking dragon form. Kind of meets in the middle, you know? And I'm kind of really excited to see where they take Ironscale in particular. I can't wait to see that long, flowing red mane. However, her voiceover could use less kind of edgy anger and more pride and haughty arrogance. I'm not a huge fan of the constant growling like she's a fucking death metal vocalist. I want to see more pride, cockiness, arrogance, kind of like Veralion Soul. You know, it's a dragon thing. And most importantly, we need a dance in dragon form. Make it happen, Riot. Seriously, we need this. While we're at it, let's talk about her lore too. Why not? Revert her damn lore to version 2, you bastards. Half dragon means half fucking dragon. I don't want to hear any bullshit about it being not credible, not making any sense, not grounded in reality. Nuh-uh, none of that. You have a reject from the Blue Man Group hoarding weapons of mass destruction that make nuclear missiles look like pop rocks under a giant fucking tree. I don't want to hear it. Dragons can fuck whatever they want in a lot of different universes. I see absolutely no reason why this should be any different. It's not like it's any more weird or fantastical than what you have now. The shit you've got currently is basically a wizard did it. Like, seriously? Oh boy, I can't wait to play as a magical fucking accident. For those of you who don't know, her lore used to be her dad hooked up with a human woman at some point. That sounds like a good story in and of itself, actually. What kind of woman would it take to catch the eye of a fucking dragon? Anyway, they fucked, had a kid. Now, as you might imagine, dragons are crazy racist. They're the best, and they fucking know it. So most of them viewed this union as a complete and total abomination, and one of them decided to actually do something about it. And since this unnamed dragon was a good deal stronger than her father, Shyvana had to spend most of her life on the run with him. He raised her out in the wilderness, constantly moving around. There was actually a really good fan comic about her making friends with a boy from a nearby village, the drake catching up with them, killing him, and that triggering her first transformation. Anyway, eventually, her dad gets cornered and killed, Shyvana manages to escape, finds Jarvan nearby, chasing the same drake, who apparently is just a dick to everybody. Shyvana leads Jarvan and his troops right back to the drake, they kill him together, and she lands the killing blow herself. That is so much better than the piece of shit we have now, man. Shyvana gives Jarvan and his country her loyalty and appreciation, and that's that. Anyway, god-awful origin stories aside, it makes sense that Shyvana would really be attracted by the philosophy of Noxus. The whole might makes right, grow strong and prosper type of philosophy. So you could have a conflict between her personal loyalty to Jarvan and Demacia, and Noxus being just a much better fit for her as a person. Whose people, by the way, would be much more accepting of her. She'd probably be a goddamn celebrity. This could lead to some really interesting and contentious conversations with Jarvan and really highlight the differences between the two regions. Anyway, so when can we expect to see anything like this? Unfortunately, it's gonna be quite a while. It seems like Riot's only trying to do 2 or 3 complete VGU overhauls per year. Next up is Mundo, with Udyr being very heavily hinted to be right after him, so the earliest we could possibly get something would be late 2021. It's probably gonna end up being mid to late 2022. It seems like despite getting 3rd in the poll by a wide margin, Riot just simply doesn't care. They seem to regret even doing a poll to begin with. They skipped her, went straight to Mundo, and then invented some bullshit about not being able to get a poll working on their new website. You're a billion-dollar company and you can't get a fucking straw poll working? I'm not buying it. I don't think they like being limited by what we want, and they just want to go back to doing whatever the fuck they want. And considering how badly she's been neglected over the last couple of years, it seems like everyone who gave a shit about her to begin with either left to Legends of Runeterra or TFT. So, in conclusion, there's 3 big holes to fill on the kit. Dragonform W, her passive, and Fury. We've identified 2 good places to add extra mechanics, a hold Q effect like Warwick, and an R2. We fixed her major health issue with her E being completely overloaded. And we made a hell of a lot of tune-ups and quality of life changes along the way. I hope that I've demonstrated to you, and hopefully to Riot Games, that we have plenty to work with to make Shyvana great again while still being Shyvana. The kind of invasive surgery that Aatrox or even Volibear got just isn't necessary. If you give her to whoever did Fiddlesticks, I think we'll be absolutely fine. And I think that just about wraps everything up in a neat little bow. Merry Christmas to one and all once again, and I'll see you in the new year. Take care.